All right, morning everybody. Welcome to the June webinar for the California Apprenticeship Initiative. I'm really glad to see everybody on the line. I anticipate we'll have a couple of more folks trickling in as we get going, but I've got a couple of minutes after the hour, so in the interest of time and because I know this is going to be a quite interesting and engaging conversation today, I want to make sure we have time. So let's get ourselves going. I am very, very thrilled to have to be wrapping up the final in a series that we've had over this last season, over the spring, that we've termed Insights from the Innovators. This is part 3. We had back in, I believe it was March was our first one, where we had a conversation with a panel of pre-apprenticeship grantees who had been part of the CAI community for previous rounds of the initiative. And we engaged them. My colleague Laura Aaron facilitated that discussion. And we had a conversation with 3 of the pre-apprentices about some of the learnings and experiences that they had had both in operating their programs, in building something that was really new for the state of California, which was particularly relevant, especially since we are now starting to develop official registered pre-apprenticeship programs across the state. Then in April, we had a conversation about a particular industry area, which was in the realm of healthcare, and spoke with a real innovative program at Delta College that was a round 1 CAI grantee. And that idea had been picked up and is being continued by other grantees in subsequent rounds of the CAI, including folks in Sacramento, the new round of grantees. There is one grantee who is continuing to do the healthcare project in Riverside. And so we had a conversation about, what it's like to actually engage in a new and a truly new and a truly innovative model for apprenticeship for California and industry in general, and what we could learn from that. Today's conversation is going to be with 3 of our apprenticeship programs, and I'm so excited because these are, really 3 of our veterans, 3 of our colleagues who have been doing some great work over the last several years and have gathered some nuggets of wisdom that I think will be exceedingly valuable, not just for folks that are on the line with us today, but also individuals who will listen to this down the line, maybe even if there are future CAI grants that happen, into 2019 and 2020 and beyond, and looking to gather insights or ideas that maybe they would never have come across if we didn't have a way to capture that information. So we're going to have a conversation today with our panelists, and let me introduce those. Eduardo, if you would mind advancing the slide. So this is me, Caleb Van Docto, at the front. I'll be facilitating the conversation today, and we're going to be chatting in alphabetical order: Victor Castillo of Southwestern College, John Milburn at the College of the Canyons, and Aviva Paley at Kitchens for Good. All 3 of these individuals have been part of CAI. I believe you're all around 3 grantees for sure, and perhaps even previous grantee rounds as well. But I know you all have had your programs going, before even starting with CAI. So you're all veterans, you're all old hats at this. You know a thing or two. I've learned a couple of things, and I'm really glad that we're going to have a conversation. As we get started, just a brief little bit of housekeeping. So since the 4 of us will be having a larger conversation, it may be a little tricky to get in questions. I think the easiest thing for folks, if you do have questions, would be to use the chat feature for folks that are on the computer and streaming the webinar itself. Down probably at the bottom of the screen, if you hover your mouse, there is an option for the chat that you can click, or if you have a condensed screen, there might be a button that says More with 3 dots above it. And if you click that, you should find a feature for chat. And opening up the chat box, you can drop in questions there that we'll make sure to cycle in if you have them. Alternatively, we will have space at the end and we'll open up the lines. So if you maybe are not on the computer, make note of your question and save it for the end, and we'll make sure that you have an opportunity to ask these three wisdom holders. So with that, let me launch in and give all three of our panelists an opportunity to tell us just a brief little bit about their apprenticeship programs. I'm curious, if you can give us maybe like a 30-second to 1 minute background and maybe speak to the problem that you're seeking to solve or the problem that your program is solving. And why don't we'll go in reverse. I'll start with Aviva and then to John and then to Victor.
Can you hear me?
Are you there, Aviva?
Yes.
Yep. Hi.
Hi. So here at Kitchens for Good, our goal is to help men and women who are overcoming histories of incarceration, homelessness, and foster care to launch their careers in the culinary and hospitality industry. And this is really a huge need on our student side, with there being about a 50 to 70% unemployment rate among these populations. And within the culinary and hospitality industry, it's one of the fastest growing industries in California, with an expected 25% job growth in the next 5 years. So there's a huge need among employers to find qualified people, with the number one reason that they are challenged to grow their business is finding qualified, trained employees to work in their kitchens. So we're really here to kind of help bridge that gap.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much for that background. And John, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your program and the problem that it solves?
Sure. This is John Milburn, College of the Canyons, and our program was designed for, the position is called material coordinators in the logistics and fulfillment field. And the company we're working with had approached us prior, talking a lot about how employees were not taking advantage of upward mobility within the company. They had a number of reasons why they thought maybe that was happening, but it seemed like when we began to approach apprenticeship, that apprenticeship was a solution for them to help build in that structure so these employees would have a clearer path toward upward mobility, so taking some of these other jobs. I guess as it is in the logistics area, people got comfortable in the building they were in and with the manager they were with, and switching to another part of the building business was something most people weren't doing. So that was really, we thought, here is an apprenticeship that doesn't exist, title, occupation, and here is a company that desperately needs something like this, trying to retain talent and build a pipeline for future talent. And that's where we began.
Awesome, thank you so much. And Victor?
Yes, good morning. I'm Victor Castillo, and I'm with Southwestern College. And our program title is Supply Chain and Logistics Apprenticeship Program. And what it means really is we found that in our region, it's very international oriented. We're very close to Mexico, and there's a lot of trade activity happening here. So you have a lot of companies that are on the warehouse and distribution, transportation, import and exporting, companies, and there's all kinds of, it's kind of complex, but it's very linked to other areas in the state, and probably not only for the western region of the U.S., but also nationwide. So there's a huge impact in this area. So in talking with and experienced employers, they point out that there was like, that yes, they hired people, but many times they were not qualified or well-trained to what their needs what these employers' needs were. And this was basically because lack of practical, knowledge, some soft skills, and some specific knowledge as well, although they can train them. But we constantly hear that that employers, even sometimes they hire people for these jobs coming out from four-year universities, but they feel that still they were not, prepared. A software skill will be team building, or even if they were more technology oriented, they didn't have enough information to know what these companies and many of these software programs that they use can be, some relationship to them. So what we found then is that we were trying to create a program that can fill that gap, and we thought that the apprenticeship model could be a potential solution for that. And so we did some partnerships, and so we found that it is a kind of fulfill these needs, and we've been very well received by some of these companies in our region.
Great, thanks. And a common thread that I heard across all of your programs is the need that you're really seeking to respond to is it's a marriage of sorts. It's one that is a need that the apprentices themselves have, but also importantly one that the employers that you're partnering with have as well, which makes a lot of sense for an apprenticeship program. And so let me open the floor to all three of you and pose an initial question here, which is, how important are these relationships that you've built with the partners? I'm curious, how you went about building those relationships, or how you maintain them, or allay any fears that any of the employers or the apprentices might have about the program that you're building.
I can start. This is Victor.
Great.
One of the things that we found, and we have some background working in the industry, especially in international trade, and we were serving some businesses. So we have some experience there and some training programs, but especially for the employers, not so much for the employees or apprentices. And so we build out those relationships, and we very, very strongly, start working with our own college, because we thought that was very important to bring it on board. But in terms of the industry, we went with the organizations that had the most representation for employers. In our case, it was the San Diego Brokers Association, and it was it's a member organization, and so we established a good relationship with them, and so they're the first ones to start telling us about that their needs, and also we're trying to explore more with them in terms of how we can respond to that. So those were initial conversations. We have also chambers of commerce that were interested and that they wanted to support their members, although there was not just specifics for these industries, but it really helped because the orientation of those chambers were with that. We talked with a lot of employers directly in many of these fields, and I think that those were kind of our strong partners. It was really critical to hear from the employers, and then even translate all that information and working out with the college. It took a long time, but it was very. I think it just strengthened that relationship.
Well, this is John. I can jump in since I'm in the middle. The relationships with our partners are extremely critical, as most of you probably already know. Without those really we had developed these relationships with many of the companies and organizations in our service area here. So because we have a pretty strong economic and workforce development division, and we have a lot of contact with employers in our district area, we were able to kind of reach out and talk with them at a deeper level because we have these relationships established. And I think that's just critical to be able to do that, because as you go into the program, you need to be able to have, good, clear, honest communication with the partners involved in the program, in the apprenticeship program, and so that you can work out some of the details and make the program the best that it can be. And I think the relationship, especially with this particular company that we're working with on our current apprenticeship grant, that relationship with them has been critical. The owner of that company has, in this case, is very tied in our community, has, sits on boards, is at every community meeting. You'll see him there. And he's really always had that singular focus of working on developing his workforce for his company. So we knew this would be a good fit, knowing his business model so long, and also the connections that we have with him, his company. I think that, there are, like the sub question here says about fears, there are fears going into an apprenticeship from all parties, because I think we're kind of designing something that's new and needs to be here. In our case, obviously, it's a non-traditional apprenticeship, not part of the trades. So it's something that we're developing, and in that, you have to have a very tight relationship as you go into development mode, because things change, new information comes up. If priorities don't match, how do you deal with that? And I think we dealt with all of that by having good, clear, open communication with the partner that we could talk frankly with, and build that shared vision for the program.
Hi. So for us, I think a lot of what it started with is seeking the employer's feedback on what their biggest pain points are and what their biggest needs are. Certainly the skill gap was certainly present, but so many of our employers really talked a lot about soft skills as well, in terms of really needing employees who are going to show up on time, who are going to really take accountability. So really making sure that was integrated into our curriculum, and really getting their buy-in to the curriculum as well. We are a bit of a unique model in that we operate a social enterprise catering operation. So we actually hire our apprentices for the first 3 months, and really are kind of working to provide them those baseline of skills and get them to the point where they are really going to be assets for their employers. And so that also provided a lot of buy-in for employers, that we could say we've given them a stamp of approval in our employees for 3 months, and we can assure you that they showed up, they worked hard. So that really helped. And I think the more of a track record we got, I really believe that our apprentices became our biggest spokespeople, and they created the solid reputation for the program out in the industry, to the point that now their employers are seeking more apprentices because they've had such a positive experience.
This is all super fascinating. You guys, all three of you have different industries and angles that you're approaching this at, and it really kind of fed into a follow-on question that you all kind of answered in a little bit, but I wanted to broach just a little bit more, which is, you're working with industries, you're working with colleges, you're working with sometimes unions, obviously the apprentices themselves, and all of these different groups, they speak different languages, and they have different processes in how they go about getting work done or getting things done. And so, it makes me wonder how you were able to bridge that language and that process divide that exists between these constituencies. And I don't know if any of you can speak to that, or say a little bit more about, was it really going to each of these entities individually? Was it, bringing folks into a room? Aviva, you mentioned that, once you got going, your apprentices really became your community advocates, which is great. Did that process work for the rest of you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, the employers were really interested in being a part of this employer committee, apprenticeship committee, to give their feedback on the curriculum and program. I think there was certainly a learning curve in terms of understanding what is apprenticeship, what is an apprentice versus a regular employee, what is on-the-job training, and how do you actually quantify that? So I think there was definitely some learning in teaching our employer partners what that looks like. And for us, a lot of how we really got them on board is we invited them to see our classes, talk with other graduates, and really get that firsthand understanding of what the program is about, instead of just kind of having students come, our apprentices go to their workplace, but really see the program from the inside out.
Mm.
Well, this is John. I can add a little bit to the question, Caleb. I think, boy, do we speak different languages. And so here, I spend a lot of my time, due to the nature of my regular job, talking with businesses and responding at the speed of business, like we like to say. And as we entered into this program, we found, one of the challenges is talking internally to our colleagues at the college and the district, to try to get those folks who, they might be in fiscal or risk management or contracts or any area of the college, even faculty and classes, instruction, to realize we're going to try to respond to the business when the business needs us, or try to fit everything we do into the business's schedule, more so than it was typical for a district to get everyone to fit into the district schedule. It's very common for a college, a district, to put out the classes and people come at those times. People don't get to change the time of their class or the dates or anything. Students just sign up and take them. But we wanted to be more flexible and allow classes and training and things to be to occur when it was convenient for the business. Well, that was a challenge, hooking those two up. We've taken great pains to try to communicate with everyone and try to communicate the priorities of industry folks, while also talking with industry and making sure they understand the way the district operates and the district concerns, and how we can engage in this together. But yeah, that I think is a very important point. And we, as a workforce person, I do get frustrated sometimes trying to explain, we're accessing a new clientele here, i.e. that, the folks that are working at companies, and we need to be flexible. As we move forward and it's college students instead, it will give us a little more room there. But I think those things are very important, and we've just spent a lot of time and meetings and giving consideration to everyone involved, hear what they need, and then share priorities and try to find that common ground where everything could work out for pretty much everyone. And everybody gives up a little bit too. So I think that was a really good question, that it's something you really need to think about going into this. You're not gonna, or at least we didn't always get the answer we wanted from folks we talked to, and we had to spend time working those things out.
Yeah. Were the employers already strong in training? There's kind of following on a question that came in from the chat. Were the employers that you're working with already strong in training, even if it wasn't maybe apprentices themselves? Did they already have their own training programs? And if so, how did you build or interact with that?
Yes, absolutely. They did have their own. They do have their own training programs, and also we provide other training programs outside of apprenticeship, or had in the past. So we definitely built on the company's internal training. We included that in our process, whether it was on-the-job training or actually a component of RSI, those kinds of things. So the company was pretty, trying to make efforts to offer training pretty regularly, both internally and from external trainers. And yet still it was difficult to get this all together. But yeah, they did do quite a bit of training already. So they were kind of familiar with it. It wasn't too hard for them to kind of get that part understood.
Was that the case for you as well, Victor and Aviva?
Yes, but in our case, the apprenticeship model was very new. We never really had explored it here in the region, at least, and that's part south of San Diego County. There was a lot of apprenticeships on the trades and with manufacturing in central San Diego and also in northern San Diego. So that there was that kind of experience. But in the part of our region, this was a very new model, and especially in a growing industry, it was something that I think the way that we arrived to it and we were able then to propose it to the employers, it was well received. I think we have a good response and excitement from the employers, but because probably we also have a very good relationship with them. But I want to say that I was just want to refer to a comment of Aviva when she said that the apprentices become, in order to grow the program, like the best, the students become the marketing themselves to attract other companies and to attract other employees. And so that I found very important. And also I think that the flexibility that we have with the grant, it was not prescribed which route we needed to use. And I thought that was also very important. We spent a lot of time trying, we almost arrived to a non-credit type of apprenticeship program. And we didn't propose it to the employers, but we explored in those conversations internally with our institution, which will be the best way. And everything kind of pointed out to have a non-credit program and having just the term of the grant to implement that program. And then make the employers pay for it, and able to sustain it. That kind of was a challenge. And it took us a really long time, and it was a really, hard conversations and just to integrate it. So the best way that ultimately we decided to move on was to find out the best way to integrate it with the college programs. And so we also had the flexibility, and the college allowed us to offer the courses at a convenient schedule for the apprentices. And so that was, I thought, very important, at least at this beginning stage and with the first cohort, to work like that. And so that has been very positive, and employers like that very much, and the apprentices as well. But what we did is we for RSI, we took approximately, it's less than 200 hours of instruction, but we made the courses the same, pretty much the same courses, but an intensive way with the regular college 3 units for credit. And so that was kind of challenging, but we also used in some cases the same instructors that are offering these courses as a regular faculty. And so that was, I thought, a way to make the institution see that, oh, okay, this is not a burden. We have the grant. We can sustain in this period. We're paying, and the grant is paying for the students, fees and materials, but, there's a way to sustain it in terms that integrated with the college departments, with the faculty, and then they start seeing the value in the institution. And so I think that that was very important to do. And although it was extremely difficult, I think we have, in terms of that sustainability, especially for the RSI, we very well integrated with the credit classes that the college offers. And although might not be as flexible in the future because we will not have the funds to pull them out, but they will be there. And in most cases, these classes are online, so we can see the students can, easily integrate into a program. And then I'll talk about some other component we added later in some of your questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, you hit on so many different points as well, like having those connections, also making the tying in the RSI and the credit classes and such, and that that really opens up a huge and larger conversation as well. So I guess let me just ask briefly about that as well. At this point, have you all been able to bring your colleges or the schools that you're connected to? Have you been able to bring them to the table in a comprehensive way, or are any of you still in discussions with the colleges? Do you primarily use credit or non-credit pathways? I'm curious how you've been able, how your programs have been able to link up these different partners, since these are such key partners.
So for Kitchens for Good, we're currently a non-credited course that uses the Grossman Adult Ed program as our LEA. And that's really worked for us in terms of, giving Kitchens for Good a lot of that flexibility to operate our program at our campus. And they've definitely had some say and support in the curriculum. But we've really found that for our industry, the college credit was not a critical piece either for our students or for the industry itself. And the content was more important.
And the certificate that comes with it.
Yes.
Yes, and in our case, we found that, and this is really, I thought that was very interesting because, well, here we had this grant, right? And the grant is calling for new and innovative programs on an apprenticeship model. And then what we were trying to do was matching the industry needs, those identified by the employers, and in our case, the college programs. And at the same time, have or think on jobs that students from community college, when a community college education can attain, right? And all of these on an apprenticeship model. And so these, we also found that in our case, students that, yes, we could offer the non-credit model, but from what usually the college offers, and many of these just specific for customized training for employers. But we found that students can advance if they have at least, if they can take some of those credit classes. And so what we did is we pulled some of the critical credit classes from a college program, and then they cannot acquire a basic certificate from college, but if they take 3 more general classes, they will do it. So they have that option. So we found a way on, okay, take these core classes that are related to the cargo and freight agent, well, that's what our apprentices are working towards, but having those courses, being the core, and then if they decide, they can take the route for additional certificates in the college or even an associate degree. But at the same time, we will not just stop the training at the apprenticeship, but we encourage them to see that as a potential. And I think that was part of what our college liked, and some of the faculty administrators supported the program from that perspective, because they saw that these students are acquiring these courses, and then there's the potential to relate for be in the program and complete, the certification. So that was I think very, very important and key in our case.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask, did you have like a real champion at the college that made that go? Because I know that's often a sticking point for a lot of programs that are really trying to get up and going, is finding ways to build in that credit where it's, especially where it's necessary. And so who are your champions at Southwestern College?
Yes, I had to have several. And on the non-credit section, our workforce continuing education school was totally on board. I mean, they really wanted to help us. But on the credit side, on the regular academic instruction side, we have faculty and we have deans and we have some upper administrators in support of the program when they saw that, it was viable. So several deans and several faculty, came to support it. And some faculty members also teaching, seeing that some of those key faculty and these programs can also be involved. That become really a valuable, add-on to what we were doing.
And you had to show them that it was viable. Like, was there like a point, a turnkey point, or like a point at which like you really kind of found, oh, this approach to getting them on board was particularly effective over other strategies?
I think it happened over time, and I participated in many advisory boards, and we formed our own committees, invited the deans, and they talked with employers on many occasions, and then in their advisories I was able to bring more employers, and so we always had the presence of the apprenticeship program all along, and it became really something more kind of natural in the conversation rather than being forcing, and seeing them that it was not that much because they were already offering, these courses, but only we pulled some of those courses because we wanted to offer them. And that also is challenging, I mean, because we had to work with multiple departments, but it worked out. And so now in this phase, they can just see it as one regular program. If they wanted to adopt it or expand it, they can do that.
Great. I had a couple of other questions that I really kind of wanted to move to. Did either of you want to add anything to that before we moved on? John or Aviva?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So I wanted to add, something else that I was thinking about a little earlier that came up in our conversation, especially Victor, since you kind of keyed in on the value of the flexibility of the CAI grant, which, nice plug there, well done, but also like all the different components that are involved in getting a program up and running. It's a lot. And having, especially if you haven't operated an apprenticeship program before, how much is involved in that. And I know, Aviva, we were having a conversation a little bit earlier about all that goes into building something out. And I was wondering if you and then maybe John or Victor could share a little bit about, some of your secret sauce or how you really kind of got the program up and going and some promising practices.
Sure. So for us, I think that the training itself, aligning with industry standards, connecting with employers, that part was fairly straightforward. I think the part that we really didn't expect the complexity of was really the ongoing tracking of apprentices. And I think that the make or break of the apprenticeship program is in the long-term tracking. So really looking at how are you monitoring their ongoing on-the-job training hours and their ongoing competencies. And we were fortunate to have a volunteer help us build out a pretty robust Salesforce tracking system that sends our apprentices a monthly form via text message where our apprentices then fill out their hours worked, their competencies, and it automatically syncs to their system. Now that's a pretty robust, database system to create. I've since learned that there's other systems like WorkHands and other database systems that are specifically designed for tracking apprenticeship on-the-job training. But I think if I could have gotten some advice 3 years ago when we started down this path, it would really be to spend a lot of time thinking through the ongoing tracking, because it's pretty easy when you've got 20, 30 apprentices. We now have over 200 graduates of our program, and they're still, a lot of them are still in the on-the-job training phase. So having to track that many without the right type of automation, it becomes unmanageable.
That's a critical component and something that, I think we've heard, here on the TA team as well for some of the folks that are newer to apprenticeships that, tracking, and it's a challenge in multiple states, not just in California, but, I know Jesse and I have actually, been helping the state of Oregon build out a manual to help their new apprentice programs understand all that they need to keep track of and pay attention to when running their programs, because it's something that's new. Victor or John, what kind of tracking systems do you guys use, or how do you go about staying on top of all of that?
This is John. I'll jump in, Victor, if you don't mind.
No, that's okay.
Okay. I was just taking note of what Aviva said because it was a great note for me. Tracking is exactly how she described it. I think it's the Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that only get us so far, and we actually need to implement something like this. I think so for me that was a good note. I can see the writing on the wall that it's going to get beyond our control here pretty soon, and we need to set this up. So we'll be looking into that. One of the things I think was, the secret sauce question was that we partnered with, one of the things we did, we partnered with Goodwill Industries of Southern California on a broader effort called our Strong Workforce Apprenticeship Group. It's a group founded by our Vice President, Jeffrey Forrest, here at College of the Canyons, and Tracy D. Philippus with Goodwill Southern California Industries. Well, Goodwill helps us a lot with the tracking and the helping implement the program, and having that other entity there to help with all the nuts and bolts of this was really helpful to me. I can't imagine if we would have just gone into this without their assistance. And as so we have the college, we have the Goodwill Southern California Industries, and we have the company involved along with the CAI grant. So I think that was one of the, really important ingredients, was to have a partner that cares as much about this as we do, and would assist in those areas. So I think that's kind of one of our success pieces.
Yes, I can tell you that the tracking, and we don't have those numbers that Aviva has. I mean, I just can't imagine. But we kind of in the middle on the way we were ready to start the program a little bit later and start recruiting and all of that. We invested in a program. It's called WorkHands, and it's an online program. And you sign the apprentices, and you sign the employers, and employers, you sign their supervisors, and and then you can track the competencies, and it's a very useful program that I understand is used by other apprentices programs nationwide. They're very helpful. I thought that that was a good investment, and allows us to see and monitor their progress. And so, like I say, we don't have as many as our industry is more focused. It's not as huge in terms of the number of people that sometimes you get involved, but it's a very useful way to do it. At least in our case, is working very well. In terms of the best practice, one thing that we did in addition to the RSI and working with the college, and also trying to have those alternatives for the students. In an industry, we also find that it's extremely valuable, and this is very well documented, that to have it's key is to have industry certifications. So what we offer in addition to the RSI, the college classes, and doing the on-the-job training, we added the component of industry certifications, and with that we align with the Council of Supply Chain Management, and we manage a program called SC Pro Fundamentals and Supply Chain Management. And we found that these certifications were very well received also by the employers, and it was very easy. Well, not, I don't want to say easy, but there's a degree of difficulty, but for students, because it's really an industry certification, but it's made to for employees that are at an entry level or in mid positions, and so we offer those. And so that to the apprentices, and I think that was also very important in terms of the students feel that, okay, they're doing these 2,000 hours on the job, they're working, doing all of that, they're taking the classes, and although they're achieving the classes, passing the courses, the certifications in a way, in a reduced time, they can see the results that they're achieving something. And I think from what the experiences and working with the students, that they felt that was really something different, that it was a value added, and that those certificates can be presented also to the employers that they achieving something. And so we feel that was an important practice. And I don't know if in many other fields that can be replicated, but in our case, especially because our industry, this industry, sees very positive industry certifications, it becomes really positive.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing. I added a couple of those links that were talked about to the chat box if folks are looking for them as well. The SC Pro Fundamentals that you just mentioned, Victor, as well as the Work Hands, which it sounds like Victor's using, and something that Aviva had heard about, even though Kitchens for Good had developed their own tracking system. I want to give folks an opportunity, because we're coming up on the hour. We got about 10 minutes, and so I wanted to give folks the opportunity to ask questions that they might be holding on to and hold. And so we'll give folks an opportunity to chat in just a minute. As you're forming your questions, I also want to pose a question out while folks are thinking about those questions as well, which is, asking about the employer incentive component to registered apprenticeship, because I know it's something, John, I know it's something you and I had chatted about a couple of days ago as well, around how you broach that conversation, and it was something I wanted to make sure we circle back to as we were talking about our partners as well. So let me open the line first and see if anybody has any burning questions that they have. And if nobody jumps on anything, then maybe, John, you could lead us off with broaching that area.
Okay.
So at this point, if anybody has a question, you can unmute yourself, *6 if you're on the telephone, or you can click your little microphone on the chat box if you have it and open it up, and please feel free. You can also drop questions into the chat. Anybody have anything burning at the moment? Okay, so we're going to feel free to jump on if you have that. Again, it's *6 if you wanted to jump in and you had a question and you're on the phone, or you can click, there's a little microphone icon and you can just click unmute over yourself if you have a question that you want to chime in. But John, let me ask, how and when you go about, and I guess this is for everybody, but how and when you go about broaching that larger conversation with employers about the incentive component to a registered apprenticeship program, because that really speaks to the maintaining the perpetuity of an apprenticeship system that goes beyond the grant itself and turning it into something that's much more systemic and long lasting than a local initiative.
Right, exactly. I think in my experience with grants that come out of the Chancellor's office, I haven't seen where there was, it's not very common, at least in my experience, that there was an employer incentive component. So this was kind of new to me to see that. And I think while it's great because it provides the seed money to get an apprenticeship program off the ground, because many of us, we may not think about it much, but employers pay for everything they do practically. They're always paying fees and costs for every move they make. Businesses do, and so it's wonderful to actually have something to give back to them to help launch a program. However, for me, I've seen the double-edged sword there is that now you have an employer or a group of employers who think that maybe that money is going to come again, or it doesn't necessarily set up the mindset for them that they need to sponsor this program. They might consider paying for their own apprenticeship program, and I think other models probably have that built into it. We applied and included the employer incentive, but my concern with it is that how do we sustain the RSI? And the company wants to keep going. Now, how is the RSI if it's not a good fit for a non-credit or a credit class? If it's something that might be fee-based that we need to provide, who's going to pay for that? How do we get funding for that? And if we start the employer off not having to pay anything really out of pocket, more they're paying their folks and they're paying a lot of cost again. But then again, that kind of then sets up the next conversation is you have to talk about asking them to sustain it or seeing if they're going to actually put money into the program to keep it going, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense on this. I'm not sure everybody used that employer incentive, but that is something that I think is both a really good thing. It's also a concern, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to approach it going forward. We're going to have discussions about that. But I think the way to really sustain something like this would be to set up corporate sponsorships or companies participating in the program, contributing and helping offset the cost of the program. Is kind of a model I'm looking into. So if that kind of speaks to it, Caleb, let me know if I can miss anything there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a question that a lot of folks run into. We certainly hear, I was chatting with a new round 4 grantee last week, as a matter of fact, and they were saying that, that's one of their initial challenges is, they're just starting with this, with the CAI, and and they're already thinking about, this is great, but we don't know like how this actually becomes a thing if we can't find a way to have these, employer partnerships that we've cultivated to have them get some buy-in. And so they mentioned that they opened up a conversation with one of their partners so far. As a matter of fact, very fortunately, their employer partner approached them about having some sort of arrangement where they pay into the program so that any folks that come from, for any folks that come from the program and ultimately become apprentices and then employed at their company. The conversations they're at are not at a point where it covers all the costs, but it's kind of like it's like a test run, like they're paying a percentage of the costs, and it's being viewed, it sounds like, as a test run to see if it's actually something that's worthwhile. And it's just one of their employer partners, but it's a way for them to test the waters early. Victor or Aviva, have either of you broached that conversation or been able to like make headway with any of that with your employer partners at this point?
Aviva, you want to go first, or I can mention something?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, in our case, and I think I want to point out that maybe it will be, considered industry by industry, right? Because when we approach it and we propose that to our employers, they were not, seeing that as a critical component of. I know it's a critical component of the grant, but they didn't see it as okay. Maybe you have incentive. And maybe more employers will jump in, but it was not really like that. We felt also that, on the contrary, some of the employers even felt like they didn't mind to contribute to pay for the training, because in other cases there's a lot of, employers pay for workforce training, and they saw that and they feel like, okay, it's not outrageous, and so we can contribute to that, and so. See many of those cases, so we didn't really approach it that way. What we did is then invest in more, like I say, and paying the student fees. Paying for the books for these classes is outrageous, and so that is a huge contribution of the grant. Paying for the industry certification. It was also very valuable, and so those are things that the students see as support services for that, and so I think it is quite difficult to manage it, but in our case at least, and I think it's because the industry and the type of employers didn't see it as a critical, and it gives us the chance for us to invest more on what we needed for the program for the students.
Okay. And I do want to be mindful of time too, Aviva. If you wanted to respond, you can, but if you don't have anything to add, we can also move forward.
I'll just be really brief and say that we do not offer any employer incentives, nor do we charge our employers anything. We are pretty fortunate that we actually have more employers that want to hire our apprentices than we have apprentices graduating our program. I think that really speaks to the huge demand in this industry in particular for really well-trained professionals. So what that ends up meaning is that we are now getting to be a bit pickier about which employers we work with, and choosing ones that are really going to either pay higher wages and also really invest in the apprentice learning and development. And so I think, again, it comes back to kind of that reputation and growing that reputation of the high quality of output being the apprentices that are coming from the program. And I think that's really one of the #1 ways that you get employers on board.
Great. Great. Well, I really appreciate all of you. I know we're already at time, but so I want to give you all an opportunity to say any last words that you had. I know we had about a dozen more questions that we're not going to get to, but before we sign off, is there anything you wanted to add just kind of as a wrap up? And while doing so, Eduardo, would you mind advancing the slide? Thanks. Any last things you guys wanted to add?
Well,
the answers, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I figured I'll just jump in. This is John. Well, let's see if I organize my thoughts here. I think that I think really, listening to this conversation reminds me that the preparation that we've all done is so critical, and the upfront work will make the project so much more successful. And I learned so much of that going through this. It's like, oh, maybe we should have done this first. Maybe we should have done that first. Which just some of these the things that you can attend to ahead of time will make the project go that much smoother and get some of those things out of the way. I think we did a lot of that, and that's one of the reasons we've been successful. But we could have actually addressed more of those things as we go. But sometimes when you're if you're pioneering something, there's going to be some rough road ahead sometimes, and just being prepared for that and be able to get through it and find solutions. That's how you do it. And then I think that's an ongoing thing. That's the other last comment for me, is this is an ongoing process after the grant ends, continuing with these companies and trying to make sure this program wasn't just a one-time with a grant type of program, but was a sustainable apprenticeship effort underway. That's what we're trying to achieve, and again, that just takes a lot of effort and a lot of planning.
Great. Yeah, it definitely sounds like that preparation and stuff is so key. So if there's any follow-up questions that folks have, the slide up here has folks' contact information, and then the next slide, Eduardo, we can continue the conversation. You also have a technical assistance team that can help back you up. We have opportunities to ask questions and get things out in front of people as well. So contact the technical assistance team as well, or check out the CII Hub forum with the link right there. And I want to thank the three of you, Victor and John and Aviva. Thank you so much for your willingness and participation and information that you're able to share. I wish you all great success, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next month at the lab in San Diego. And if you can't make it, we are going to live cast one of the sessions so folks can join on in a similar fashion to the way we do webinars. So keep a lookout for that information coming. Take care, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, Caleb. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.